so they said, okay, we'll give you 2 days in Orlando. I live here in Orlando. We'll give you 2 days here. And I said, okay, but only if I get to pick the schools. So I have some favorite schools that I use. I have some that are my good luck schools that I usually use. And I remembered, I had such a great visit when I came here, like you said, a few years ago. I thought, I'd like to visit St. Luke's. So here we are at St. Luke's. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the music and some of the audio stuff to work, so I may have to narrate some of the slides that normally has much more exciting elements than just my voice. But I wanted to get to know you a little bit. So what grades are here? Who can tell me that? What grade are you in? Fifth. Who are my fifth graders? Raise your hands, fifth grade. Oh, they all sit together like a pack. All right, I'm guessing, are there fourth graders here? Are there third graders here? Are there sixth graders here? Oh, I didn't know we went to sixth grade. And is that the oldest, or is there anyone older than sixth grade? We have up to eighth grade in here? Who's the seventh graders? Oh, now I see the mustaches and the attitudes. That's right. All right. And eighth grade? All right. Well, this is great. Well, I am so honored to be here at St. Luke's. So, my name is James Ponte. I am an author, which is a very strange thing for me to say out loud. I usually say I'm a writer, but on release week, I'll go ahead and say author. And I have been one all my life, and we're going to have time for questions, and we're going to have time for everything. But I am here with the release of a new book, and this book is called City Spies, City of the Dead. Has anyone, and it's okay if you haven't, has anyone seen any of the City Spies books before? Okay, so City Spies books, to give you a taste of them, I was going to show you, I made a little movie, but that's the part that we can't get to work. So let's go ahead and play it, and I'll just kind of tell them, I'll do my announcer voice during it and see if we can make it work. So, we go back into, it starts in, does it not even play without the, earlier it was playing. All right, go ahead then and skip to the next slide. Okay, so it can't even play like a PowerPoint, right? Then let's turn it off. All right, so none of these will work. Oh, man. All right, I'm sorry. My whole presentation was different than what we're going to be able to do, I guess. Because it's playing all the slides. It's not like letting the pictures come one at a time. All right. No. Okay. So the book takes place in Egypt, or most of it takes place in Egypt. So if you can tell me this, what is the name in ancient Egypt? What were the kings and queens' knows? What was the term for that? Pharaoh. That's right. They were known as the Pharaoh. And who's the most famous pharaoh in the history of Egypt? King Tut. Okay, so we have nice, smart kids here at St. Luke's. We're off to a great start. So King Tut was the most famous pharaoh. What I want to know is why he's the most famous pharaoh. All right, you had a confident arm raise. What's your name? Ella. Why is King Tut the most famous of all the pharaohs? He died when he was young. That's an important thing. King Tut was the boy king, but that's not the reason he's the most famous. Do you have an idea? Okay, very good answer. King Tut's fame has nothing to do with his life. He was not a well-known pharaoh during his time. He was not particularly popular or successful or anything. He came pharaoh pretty young. He died pretty young. But King Tut is the only pharaoh whose tomb was discovered completely intact. So he's the only one. So what used to happen is the pharaohs used to be buried with all their possessions and all this gold and like animals and chariots and okay. Let's just skip this slide because we've passed this. Let's go to the next one. Play one. Press one. So we want to see a picture of King Tut. It should come up next. There we go. Okay, stop right there, please. Thank you. All right, so King Tut, that's his famous burial mask. Now, this is a very hard question. I do not expect anyone to know this, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. Does anyone know the name of the archaeologist who discovered King Tut's tomb? I have a hand up there, a very confident-looking raise. Howard Carter, first and last name. Let's hear it. Woo-hoo! All right. So, next slide, please. Howard Carter. Now, Howard Carter wasn't really an archaeologist. He was, but things were kind of, for lack of a better word, nudgy or prissy back then. He didn't go to school to be an archaeologist, so the archaeologists didn't consider him an archaeologist. He was a painter. He was a painter who became obsessed with finding tombs, and he spent a lot of time and a lot of dedication and made the greatest discovery in archaeological history. He didn't get as much credit as he would have had he been someone who was classically trained. But here's a secret that you won't hear most places. Howard Carter did not discover King Tut's tomb. Does anyone know who did? And probably you don't, because they keep it a secret. Next slide, please. This boy did. A 12-year-old boy discovered the tomb. And what I think is interesting about that is no one wants to give credit to a kid for doing something great, right? When kids do great things, the nearest standing adult gets the credit. And that's what happened with Howard Carter and Hussein, this boy. And when I read that, when I came across that fact, because I knew I wanted to set this book in Egypt, when I came across that fact, I thought, that's what my books are about. My books are about these. See, what you didn't see in the video is, I forgot. I'll tell you the basic idea of the story, which is 5 kids from around the world have been adopted by a secret agent, and that secret agent raises them as a family of spies. And they get sent on missions by British intelligence to places where adults would stand out, but kids can blend in. And I thought, when I read this thing about Howard Carter and Hussein, that that's what my kids are like in my books. So I decided to start the book there. So I'm going to read to you a little bit from the book, if that's okay. I got an advanced copy, even though you're not supposed to have them today. Prologue, Howard and Hussein, Valley of the Kings near Luxor, Egypt, November 4th, 1922. The 12-year-old boy slowly rode a donkey into the desolate Egyptian landscape known as the Valley of the Kings. He had bare feet and wore a white headscarf and a tattered linen tunic called a jalabia. His name was Hussein, but to the workers toiling in the desert sun, he was simply Al-Saka, or water boy. Twice a day he filled 2 large clay jars with water from a well, loaded them into a harness strapped across the donkey's back, and took them to the excavation site where crews were searching for the elusive tomb of a pharaoh named Tutankhamun. King Tut's final resting place had sat hidden and undisturbed for more than 3,000 years, so long that most experts believed it was only a legend. The heat was already stifling when Hussein reached the site at just past 10. Because the jars had rounded bottoms, he had to scoop out some sand for them to stand upright, and as he did, he felt a smooth stone just beneath the surface. He dug to reveal a step leading down into the ground. Fittingly, the tomb of Egypt's boy king had been discovered by an Egyptian boy. Hussein excitedly rushed to tell Howard Carter, the British archaeologist in charge of the excavation. Workers began clearing the area, and by the end of the next day, they had uncovered a stairwell carved directly into the bedrock. At the bottom, a doorway had been plastered shut and marked with the hieroglyphic seal of a jackal Anubis above 9 captives. Carter beamed, his eyes wide with amazement, as he ran his fingers across it. It was the symbol of the royal necropolis, Egypt's ancient city of the dead. So I thought it would be fun to start at this story that we know a little bit about and find out that a kid was involved. And then the next thing we jump 100 years, and now my kids are breaking into the British Museum to steal some of the things that Howard Carter found in that exhibit. So that's what you can start reading tomorrow. Although I really recommend reading the books from the beginning, the first book first, because there's a lot of setup in those that get spoiled otherwise. Next page, please. So as of tomorrow, I've written 10 novels. which seems unbelievable to me. So we're going to have a little contest here. All right, so we have all the way from 4th to 8th. So we'll do 4th and 5th for the first contest. I need a 4th grader who wants to guess in 10 novels, how many pages is that? $700. All right, who's my 5th grader? What do you want to guess? 3,000. So we have 3,000, we have 700. I'll do a 6th grader in there too. Where's the 6th grader? All right, how many pages? 350. Next click, please. 10 books. Next one. 3,529 pages. So that was a pretty good guess. Someone had 3,000 in there. All right. Now the harder one. How many words is that? So we're going to go, we'll go back to 6th grade. I want a different 6th grader. How many words? 10 books, 3,600 pages. 100,000 words. It's okay. 7th grader, where's my 7th grade? How many words? 130,000. And 8th grade, where are the 8th graders? They were, what's the guess? What? A million? All right, let's see what the answer is. 561,519 words. That's a lot, by the way. It was a little upsetting when I read that, when I figured that out this week. So I have written 10 books. I've written 3,500 pages. I've written over 500,000 words in these books. So you can make some pretty obvious guesses about me growing up. I always had a book with me everywhere I went. I was reading, I was writing, I was doing that. No. I have written more books than I read by the time I graduated from high school. That's not an exaggeration. That's not me saying, oh, I did not read 10 whole books before I finished high school in my entire life up to that point. I'm not counting like Green Eggs and Ham, but you know, like an actual novel book. Next slide, please. This is the dossier on me growing up. Born in Pisa, Italy. Grew up in Atlantic Beach, Florida. I was always creative. I always liked writing, and I liked drawing maps. I love soccer. I love basketball. Hated reading. And then that's me in my Little League picture. Very important picture. This is the kind of memory that I have. I can tell you the name of the pitcher for every single hit that I got in Little League. And that's because I only got one. His name was Joe Owens. I was the worst Little Leaguer in the history of Atlantic Beach Little League. People would moan when I would show up on the first day and they found out I was on their team. Coaches would strategize how not to play me. So why do I put the picture up? Because I liked it. And I think it's important for us to remember something. Don't just do the things that you're good at. Do the things you like, even if you're not good at them. Sometimes you'll get better. I never got better at baseball, but you know what? I follow it every year. I travel to see the Red Sox play all over the country because I love them. Baseball has been good to me, even though I was not a good practitioner. But I didn't do that with reading, and I have paid the price my whole life. Because I was as bad a reader as I was a baseball player, but I gave up on reading. And that was a huge mistake. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, this is my family growing up. I like to give you a head start of where I come from. I'm the adorable baby, by the way. Yeah. Oh. I'm the adorable baby in a three-piece suit because I was also a certified public accountant at the age of 3. No. And I love this picture for 2 reasons. Actually, it's my favorite picture from my childhood of my family, without question. First reason is sweaters. My brothers are both wearing sweaters. Why were we wearing sweaters? Yes. Because it was cold. Smart answer. The right answer for everyone in this country except my mother. This was Florida in the summer. This is Jacksonville Beach, Florida in the summer. Why are we wearing sweaters? You couldn't possibly get it. Unless you were my mother, the logic would not work. But there is a logic. No one in my family had ever been to college before. That's the answer. None of you were going to say that. You were going to say weather-related issues. No one in my family had ever been to college before, and my mom wanted to change that. But she didn't know what college was like. And one day she was in Boston, she was visiting a friend, and the friend said, "Oh, meet me here on the street. It's right by Boston University." And so she sat on a bench for half an hour waiting for her friend, and every boy that walked by wore a sweater. Now, they wore a sweater because it was Boston and it was fall and it was cold. But my mom got into her head, sweaters mean you go to college. Boys who go to college wear sweaters. So whenever we had an actual picture to take for school or for the family, no matter what the weather was, in our very hot, humid city where we grew up, we were expected to wear sweaters or a business suit. So I love this thing about her. But more than that, I love the hair. I mean, look at the hair. This is the worst hair in the history of photography. I mean, even talking even those battle scenes from the Civil War with the big beards, those guys have better hair than this. We start with my brother on the left. His hair goes up and it comes down and it goes up again and it comes down and over and then way down and up and down. That is not a hairline. Next picture, please. It's a coastline. The southern coast of Australia matches my brother's hair perfectly. Perfectly. Now, my brother Terry's hair, we know who that matches, right? Next slide, please. Yeah, right? That little thing in the middle that comes down. And mine, if you follow mine from your right, my left over, there's hair, and then it just disappears, right? Like someone had one of those old push mowers like you saw in the Warner Brothers, and just was, oh my God, that's a head, right? And they stopped. Click the next sign, right? I mean, it's like a lightning bolt. It goes up and then down and then over. I had a lightning bolt on my head long before Harry Potter ever cropped up, right? And it's because our mom cut our hair. We had no money growing up. When this picture was taken, we were on food stamps. She was a single mother. I never met my father. I don't say that it's I hardly knew him. I never met him. I'm not 100% sure who he was. And I don't say that so you feel oh, that's so sad. I say that because if you've read any of my books, that's what they're about. All my books involve kids separated from their parents, trying to build families, found families, all these things that we're part of. And that's what we do with books. We take our silly haircuts and our silly sweater stories, and we throw them all into the pages. And those 500,000 words are me trying to figure out. And I figured it out. And I had it, believe me, let me set the record straight. Amazing childhood. I've had a fantastic life. But I always wondered what the father would be like, what that would have been like. And so that wondering, I like to put it in the page because I know there are kids all over the world. My books are translated in 12 languages now, which is amazing to me. But it's there are kids around the world who don't know their fathers. And when they read about that kind of thing, they like that. They connect with that. And that's part of the magic of what books can bring. All right, next slide, please. All right, this is where I grew up. This is Atlantic Beach Elementary School. The school, like I said, I had a really happy childhood. This school was 5 blocks from the ocean, and my house was right in the middle. I could walk 2.5 blocks. I could be at the beach. I could walk 2.5 blocks. I could be in school. I enjoyed school. I had a playground. I had a basketball court. I had a soccer field. I had an ocean. I wasn't allowed to swim by myself, but, other than that, it was pretty much an ideal place to grow up. Next slide, please. This is my first grade class. You can pick me out if you've been paying attention. Next one. Because I have a sweater on, right? Because it's a picture day, and my mom wanted me to look like I was going to go to college. So even though it's probably, September when you take your pictures, and I have a long sleeve shirt and a sweater, and they knew to take the picture first period, because by the end of the day, I was just a sweat stain, and the sweater was probably not usable again. And the next one? All right, that's my friend Mary. So Mary sat across the table from me, and Mary and I knew her all growing up until the point she went to Catholic school and I stayed in public school. But Mary was a friend of mine growing up. But in elementary school, I was incredibly jealous of Mary Kay. Mary Kay had, if I, like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe of my life, where of course I'm the hero, Mary Kay is all the villains. She's like Thanos and Doc Ock. She's all of them rolled up into one. She is the evil super genius of Atlantic Beach, Florida, because she has a superpower that is just not fair. She could read so well. We sat opposite each other, and we'd open our books. And I'd start to read, and in my head, I would slowly say each and every word. Sarah looked at the water stain. It never sounded like a book. It was just like I had a hammer, and words were bricks, and I had to break through each one and then step to the next wall. And I'd be in the middle of the first paragraph. And across the table, I'd hear as she flipped the page. We sat directly across from each other. And I'd look up and I'd think, oh, Mary Kay's lost. She doesn't even know what page we're on. She's trying to find the page. And then I'd see her eyes with this like Terminator robot thing going like, I'm like, she knows what page. She's already on the next page. I'm like, how can she be on the next page? I'm on the first page. And then I'd get worked up about it. And then she'd turn the page again. I'm like, oh, I'm falling further behind. And so I'd go back and, my name is, and I'm like, I've already read that part. And I hated her. I'm not proud. I hate her. She's like one of my best friends, but there's a part of me that hated her. How could she read like that? We had, one day a woman came to the door of the classroom, and she said, I need James and Mary Kay to come with me. And what did everyone in class say? Ooh. The ooh is the only universal truth of mankind. I don't know if you know that. Throughout history, from the dawn of schools, whenever someone is called out of class, everyone goes, ooh. Alexander the Great at Athens Elementary School. Socrates comes to the door and says, Plato wants to see you, Alex. Everyone goes, ooh, Alexander's not so great now. William Shakespeare at Stratford-upon-Avon Middle School. Jan Master Shakespeare, doth must come with thee to thine office. Ooh. So I get James, Mary Kay, come with me. Ooh. Now the problem is, I'm oohing too, just by habit. I'm like, wait, you're oohing yourself. What have you done? And I'm walking, and I'm in that. You ever get that mode? It's like, okay, I have now 27 seconds to strategize how to solve whatever problem I've gotten myself into. And we're walking down the hall. And then I say to myself, wait a minute. I can't be in trouble. Mary Kay's here. She can't be in trouble. It'd be impossible. If Mary Kay and the principal disagreed, the principal would be fired, and the superintendent would come and say, we're sorry, Mary Kay, we'll find someone more agreeable, right? So I'm thinking, okay, I'm not in trouble, so now I'm out of class. And then I'm thinking, wait, she could be a witness. This could be like a grand jury thing where the principal says, okay, Mary Kay, what did James do in the cafeteria yesterday? And so now I'm terrified. And so finally, halfway down the hall, I break down and I say, where are we going? What's going on? And she says, you're going to take a test to see if you belong in gifted class. And I said, there's a class with gifts? I don't need to take a test. I belong in a class with gifts. And this woman rolled her eyes and didn't even respond. And I look over, and I see Mary Kay has a different look than normal. Because normally Mary Kay has this look. Mary Kay's first name for the first 3 years of school, I thought was Mary Kay, first female president of the United States. That's how she was always there. Hi, this is Mary Kay. She'll be the first female president of the United States. Like everyone knew Mary Kay. And this is James, who sits at the same table, right? And normally she had this bright, look at her, she's sweet as could be. Look at the teacher. The teacher's holding her like the Infinity Stone, like, oh, thank God you're here, Mary Kay, because the other 29 are killing me right now. All right? And we're going down, and she doesn't look like that now. No. She, at the moment, looks like J.J. Watt about to kill a quarterback, right? I mean, she's got like this game face on, and she's looking. And I look in her hands, and she's got 2 long, perfectly sharpened pencils. And I think, she knew about this test. And then I remember Mrs. Brooks had pulled us aside. She said, take these notes home to the two of us, like 3 days earlier. Take these notes home to your parents. I'm like, okay. And Mrs. Brooks looked at me. She goes, James, what are you going to do with that note? I'm going to give it to my mom. When? As soon as I get home, Miss Brooks, I'm going to go home and I'm going to give my mom this note. Are you sure? Yes, ma'am. And what did I do? No idea, but I certainly didn't give it to my mom. I did what I always did. I crumpled it up, and I stuffed it in my backpack so that at the end of the year in June, we could have our annual shake out all the messages that never made it home to Mom. I go, oh, Mom, you're supposed to work at the Halloween festival. Never mind. Okay. So obviously they sent a note home. They told you to be ready, and I wasn't ready, and Mary Kay was ready, and we go into this test, and we are there, and we sit down. But she's got these long pencils, and I'm looking, and I'm like, I don't have a long pencil. Right? And all I found in my pocket was a nub, like a pencil nub. It used to say, Miami Dolphins. And now it just said, M, right? It only made it to the first M. M. And the eraser's not so much attached as it is if I hold my thumb like this. So we're bubbling the test, and she's bubbling. She's like doing like the reading, like, I'm going to do this page left-handed. So easy. And I'm over here, and I'm sweating, and I'm stressing, and I'm bubbling as the best I can with my little nub, and I'm trying to keep up. So my brain is focused on the test. My hand is focused on the bubbling and keeping the pencil together. But my left hand has nothing to do, nothing whatsoever. And I'm in a fifth grade classroom where I've never been before. And so my left hand starts searching the desk, and I found a pair of scissors. Yeah, O was right. And so for reasons that I never have understood, I started playing the scissors like they were a musical instrument. Snip, 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 snip. And I am just doing it, right? I am not a candidate for having 10 books published, let me tell you that. I am snipping, and halfway through the test, my brain throws on the brakes and goes, Eee! My brain turns its attention to my left hand and says, did you just cut your sock? And I look down, and my sock is split open like a banana peel. So my left hand, being honest, says to my brain, yes. And my brain says, do you think that's a good idea? And my left hand said, yes. So my left hand kept snipping. I'd cut off a chunk of sock and put on the table, and I'd cut off a chunk of sock and I'd put on the table. This is all a true story, as is this part. One day, my wife happened to be somewhere where I was doing this talk. She was in the back row, and I get to this part, and I mentioned, by the end of the test, my entire sock was off, but I never took off my shoe, which I think is pretty gifted, by the way. And my wife in the back room goes, well, that explains so much of my life. I mean, seriously, if they had asked us, if they had come in and they had said, all right, here's the thing, get your sock off, but you can't take your shoe off, Mary Kay would be sitting at that desk this day still. They did not find it impressive. The woman comes by, she sees this. She said, what is that? And I just look up and I go, sock. Throw it away. And so we go back to class. We get back to class, and what does everyone say? And why does James only have one sock on? Is the next thing they said. And Mrs. Brooks asked the woman, she goes, how'd that go? She said, oh, it went great, except you sent James to the wrong test. And she says, what do you mean? And she said, today we're testing smart kids. And all of a sudden, the world made sense to me. I'm not smart. That's why I can't read like her. That's why I can't keep up with everyone in the reading, because I'm not smart. And a very lucky thing happened. And it's amazing, by the way, how awful adults can be, right? I mean, she had to know I was there. She had to know everyone in the class could hear her. She didn't care. Luckily, my teacher heard, and my teacher saw that I heard. And as soon as the woman left, my teacher came over to me, and she leaned over, and she whispered into my ear. She goes, ignore that woman and forget that test. I'm your teacher, and I know better than anyone how very smart you are. I sent you to that test for a reason. But I didn't feel smart, especially about reading. We had this poster on the wall, and the poster had everyone's name on it, and it had all these boxes. And every time you read a book, you got a star and you put it next to your name. Boom. Every Monday we'd come in. Who read a book this weekend? Whose hand went up every time? Oh, my God. Mary Kay. I read Little House on the Prairie. Oh, here you go, Mary Kay. Star. I read A Wrinkle in Time. Oh, here you go, Mary Kay. Star. Oh, I read James and the Giant Peach and translated it into Spanish for my mission trip. Oh, here's 5 stars, Mary Kay. And at the end of the year, I went over and I looked at that poster. And Mary Kay's line looked like NASA sent a telescope into space and took a picture of the galaxy. Because there was no space for stars. They were just overlapping each other. And my line looked just like the flag of Texas, which is known as the Lone Star State. I had 1 star for the year. And when I got it, I was so proud. Here's my star. And when I got to the poster, I was just embarrassed. Everyone's going to notice. And so I waited till no one was looking, and I put my star in the middle so that everyone would think all my other stars had fallen off. And I decided to stop reading. And I stopped reading. And I didn't really read, what I would call reading, for a long time. You know what finally got me to read? There's this thing called a blind date. And the whole concept of a blind date is for guys to get to date girls who are way out of their league, right? I mean, that's the whole, blind dates are totally invented by guys. There's no way it wasn't. And I went on a blind date in college. And the whole point of the blind date is to be good enough that she wants to go on another one. The second date's a great one, right? So I'm sitting across, and this girl is amazing. She's cute. She's funny. She's smart. I'm like, yes, this is great. This is great. And 30 minutes into it, she goes, oh, by the way, I love to read. Do you like to read? And I faced a very difficult decision. Tell the Mary Kay story and not get a second date, or just maybe lie a little. But I didn't lie a little, because if you're going to lie, I said, love it, read all the time, can't get enough. Books. I'm all about the books. And it would have been fine. Except we've been married for 33 years now. She kept hanging around, and I kept having to carry books. And she'd go, oh, I'm going to read some. Yeah, me too. And eventually, when we had a couple kids and she couldn't get rid of me, I said, about that first date, I might have lied about the reading part. She goes, yeah, the fact that you've been reading the same book the entire time I've known you is a dead giveaway that you are not a reader. But I am now. I love it. I'm just still slow at it. We got to try the things that are hard when we know they're good. Right? Let's see the next slide. So if I am not a reader, how did I become a writer? This is the 5th grade hallway at Atlantic Beach Elementary. Room 123 belonged to Mr. Prothero, and Mr. Prothero was the only man who taught at my elementary school. But he wasn't just a man. Mr. Prothero was the man. 6 foot tall. His afro made him 6'2". His stylish 1970s platform shoes made him 6'3". And teachers walked down the hall, but he strutted with swagger. And we were in awe of Mr. Prothero. 3rd grade, I'm standing there against the wall. Here he comes. We're all lined up to go somewhere. And I see him, and I look at him, and I look at him. And he looks at me, and he goes, Mr. James, how's it going today? And I'm like, he knows my name. I'm only in 3rd grade, and he knows my name. And I told my mom, I hope I get Mr. Prothero. Do volunteer for every single thing, so that when the time comes, you can say, you have to give him Mr. Prothero. And as it happened, I did get Mr. Prothero for a homeroom and for language arts, and it was great. Because I'm going to learn all the guy stuff I didn't learn from my dad because I didn't know my dad, right? What are we going to learn in here? We're going to learn about football, about wars. We're going to grow mustaches. I mean, wouldn't it be great if I headed off to middle school with a mustache? That'd be pretty sly. I like that. So one day he goes, we're here. We're doing my favorite unit of the year. And I'm thinking, mustaches? Now, here they come. He says, we are going to learn over the next 3 weeks, we're going to learn all about poetry. And it was as if he came and punched me. I'm just staggered. I have waited years for you to be my teacher. I have thought you were going to be the one who was going to open up the world for me. I thought you were going to change my life. And you give me poetry? And you know what? Changed my life. Absolutely 100% changed my life. I could read a poem. They're short. I could keep up. He said, now when you read a poem, it's important to remember, you got to read it slow. In my head, I'm thinking, I only know how to read slow. Not a problem. You got to say each word in your head so you hear the rhythm. I'm like, again, only way I know how. Not a problem. And then one day he had us write poems. So we each wrote a poem. I wrote one called Stars. And he collected them and he said something terrible. He said, I'm going to read your poetry out loud. And I felt betrayed, right? I was like, I don't really want my poem about stars to be read out loud. I don't want Mary Kay to hear it. I don't want everyone to hear it. And we'll make fun of it, and maybe it doesn't rhyme, and I think it rhymes, but I mispronounce words a lot, and maybe it doesn't, and there's so much that can go wrong. And then he added a wrinkle. He held up a stack of papers. He said, these are some of the greatest poems ever written, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to shuffle these two stacks up. And I'm going to read, and you won't know which stack I'm reading from. And I'm going to read a poem, and you have to guess who wrote it. It could be a classmate, or it could be a famous poet. And he read the first poem. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch these woods fill up with snow. Snow, a dead giveaway that no kid from Atlantic Beach, Florida, who'd never seen snow before, wrote this poem. Plus, it was really good. We couldn't write that well, so we knew it was one of the famous poets. We had no idea which one, so we just randomly guessed them. Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, Robert Frost. Yes, it's Robert Frost. Next poem. My name is Pat. I own a cat. It's really fat. How about that? Like, oh, now that sounds a bit more like a fifth grader wrote that one. And we got one named Pat in the class, so we're going to guess Pat. And then we just kept going, and we kept going. And you get that anxiety, like, oh my God, here comes mine. And it was a lesson a little bit because none of the poems were good. So I'm like, okay, it's not going to be so bad. He said, this next poem is called Stars. I do not remember how it goes, but he read it. He read my poem, and he asked who wrote it. And a girl raised her hand and answered Shakespeare. And it's the only time someone answered a real poet for one of our poems. And the coolest man I've ever met with the greatest mustache I have seen to this day looked at me and smiled and said, no, it was James. This is exactly what he said. James, someone thought something you wrote was written by the greatest writer in history. How does that make you feel? It's a perfect question. It was 1976, which makes it what? 50 years? Almost 50 years ago, 47 years ago. I remember exactly what he said 47 years ago. Because that's the moment I knew I was going to become a writer. Because I wanted to feel like that as often as I could. I wanted that feeling. But what was I going to write? I didn't know. I couldn't write books because I didn't read books. So I went to college. When I got to college, I majored in screenwriting. And I started writing scripts for TV shows. So I don't know. I can stop. All right, next slide. I'll stop with that then. Okay, so what's it like to write spy novels? If we had music, we'd have Secret Agent Man playing now, but that's fine. So press the next one, and then you have to press it again. That first one starts to be, yeah. So sometimes you're on mission. So here I am with Agent Kevin Hart, and Kevin and I working together in New York one day. And then the next time, next slide, you're undercover. And this is the day I found out that my celebrity lookalike is Charlie Brown. It was a very disappointing day. Very disappointing day. And the next one, some Sherlock Holmes Museum. Next one, on a deadline. Next one. Being chased by a buffalo in downtown San Francisco. There are wild buffalo in the middle of San Francisco. It's crazy. And the next one, this is me the day that Barnes & Noble announced that my book was the book of the month at every Barnes & Noble in the country, which seems impossible for a kid who didn't read, right? Who can tell me what, I can see what time. In a church, there shouldn't be clocks, but I realize I'm used to look. I'm supposed to be done by 11, is that right? Okay, what we'll do is we'll stop there, and any questions? Does anyone have any questions? And if we run out of those, I'll go back to, yeah. How long does it take to make a book? That's an interesting question because there's a lot that goes into it that you wouldn't expect. You come up with the idea, and then you think about it for a while, and then you work out an outline, and then you show it to a couple people. From the time I thought about City Spies to the time that City Spies came out was 4 years. Writing, though, is about a year, although now I have to get it down to 6 months because now I'm doing 2 books a year. So I have to write a book every 6 months. I just finished a book 2 weeks ago, but unfortunately my next book is due 2 months from now. So I have to write almost an entire book in the next 2 months. So it comes, and I'm spending 2 weeks of that on tour. Yeah. I have never written anything that didn't publish. I am lazy. If it's not going to be published, I'm not going to write it. Yeah. I have a dog named Lucy who is so many different breeds that no one knows what she is. And she's wonderful. She's a rescue dog, and she sits next to me all day while I write, and we go on 3 walks a day. Yeah. Pat who? Oh, Pat. Oh, Pat from 5th grade? I don't love Pat. We're fine, but we went separate ways by the time we got to high school. Yeah. I'm not famous now, but there's no way to know that kind of stuff. I have friends who are unbelievably famous. If I asked you to name your 3 favorite middle grade writers, I would be amazed if I don't have at least one of their phone numbers in my phone. So we'll try that for a second. Give me the name of a middle grade writer. Yes. Okay, let's not do J.K. Rowling. Let's not do Rick Riordan, and then go. Okay, try again. You don't know any authors. What? Watkins? I don't know Watkey. Okay. I could be wrong on this challenge. I might have been wrong. Mark Twain? I do have his phone number, but oddly, he never answers. Never answers. I said middle grade writer. Jeff Kinney? I've been to his store and in his office, but I don't know Jeff. Suzanne Collins. I have Suzanne's number on my phone. I'm having lunch with her on Saturday. So there we go. Suzanne Collins, for those that don't know, wrote The Hunger Games. And Suzanne is my oldest friend in the world, practically. Suzanne and I spent 10 years together writing television. And Suzanne is the one who talked me into writing books. And our kids used to play together when they were little. And I have been to 3 of the movie premieres with her. So, yeah. You like those books? They're really good. I can't wait to see her. I haven't seen her in a couple of years because she lives in Connecticut and I live down here. All right. Any other questions? We're back to questions, not author name. Yeah. Oh, who? Okay. You want who? C.S. Lewis. He's also never answers. C.S. has been dead for a while, but is a good writer. Yes. I guess I should have said living writer. That was my mistake. Do I think they'll ever make that? I don't think so, but we've sold the rights to it and we've negotiated it, and movie studios own the rights to them, but I tend to think that's not going to happen because then it's easier not to get your hopes up. And then if anything happens, that's just bonus and kind of fun. Yeah. I have signed your books already. Yeah. Do I know who? Tommy Greenwald? No, actually, I don't know Tommy. And I know people who know him, but I don't. So I know like a third of the people, maybe. I give people, the kids in my neighborhood read the books as I'm writing them. So I get their feedback to them. All right, so here I will tell you this. I'll see if you know this. So this is my weekly Zoom group. I'll see if you know any of these games. So every week, and they're part of my nonstop text chain. Gordon Corman, Stuart Gibbs, who writes Spy School, Max Brauer, who writes The Last Kids on Earth, Christina Soon-Tornvat, who won the Newbery Honor last week, Karina Ann Glaser, who writes Last Kids on Earth, Sarah Mlynowski, who writes Whatever After. Who else is in there? Yeah, it's a pretty good group. And like every year, one of our friends wins the Newbery. I mean, it's like 5 years in a row now. It's like pretty ridiculous. This year, 2 of them did. Yeah. Question? What's my favorite book I've ever written? I don't have a favorite book I've ever written because I don't see them as separate. To me, they all live in the Pontyverse of my head, and they're all just one long story. I like parts of certain of them, but I think the best written one is the newest one. I think hopefully I'm getting better as I go. So yeah. All right, and we have a few more minutes or 5 more minutes. Okay, yeah. James Patterson, I don't. Chris Gravenstein, who writes books with him, Chris is a good friend, and Chris is doing an event with me on Saturday. But, so he writes like middle school and ha-ha and, or me funny or, yeah. I don't read the, yeah. You like them though? Those are good, yeah. Yeah. Jennifer Nielsen? No, she's coming here though, right? Yeah, again, we have mutual friends, but I shouldn't do the whole now we're going to keep listing writers till we're done, is that right? Which is fine. I've met Rick, but I don't know him. Suzanne's good friends with him. So I met him with her. Yeah. Stuart's probably my best friend. Yeah, yeah. We do a lot. We see each other a lot. We do a lot together. All right, hands down, hands down, hands down. Is there anything the teachers would like me to cover? Other than, oh, that's well played. Other than me just answering questions about authors. Is there any, like, is there writing stuff that you're doing or anything? If not, yeah. I have a new series that starts next year. So I'm going to have a new series called the Sherlock Society, and it will begin next year, and it's about a multi-generational family that lives together in Miami, and the kids are bored over the summer, and the grandfather was an investigative reporter for the Miami Herald. He's now retired, and so they go to his cold cases from the 70s and the 80s, and they try to find the answers today. So hopefully I can write that in 2 months. We'll see. Otherwise, then I have an awkward conversation with my editor. Yes. Yeah. When did you get it? You've already gotten it? Okay. Any book? If there are books that got missed, let me know and I'll sign it. Because I should have. I signed all weekend to get them. So, yeah. Yes. No. Okay. Well, that shouldn't be mine. I'll give you authors that I think you should read. Christina Soon-Tornvat is the place to start. Christina Soon-Tornvat wrote A Wish in the Dark. She wrote The Last Map Maker is the one that won the Newbery this week. She also wrote, she writes a diverse kind, she writes picture books. In fact, she wrote a nonfiction book about the soccer team that got rescued in the cave in Thailand. That's amazing. I'd read Christina Soon-Tornvat. I'd read Jason Reynolds. And I'd throw in there, who's the good extra? You know what, I tell you, the book that I've been excited about this year did not win anything, and I'm kind of amazed. It's called Rover's Story. It's by Jasmine Warga, and it's all told from the perspective of the Mars rover. But there are great books. There's great mystery writers. There's a lot of good stuff out there. Yeah. I opened each file, and it gives you an automatic word count. So it wasn't as hard. I had just to find the 10 files on my computer somewhere and just write them down. Yeah. Yeah, we that could happen, but I won't be making them. I am focused just on writing them right now. I'm more than happy to do that. Yeah. The fourth City Spice comes out tomorrow. The fifth one is done, the first draft. I'll start writing the sixth one probably in June. So we have at least six. My guess is we're going to have about 10. So as long as people buy them, though, we will keep writing them for sure. And I say we because my wife helps out. I got an amazing editor, amazing publisher. Only my name goes on the book, but there's a lot of people involved in the making of each book. Probably at Simon & Schuster alone, there's probably 30 people involved with each book that I do. Yeah. Um, it depends on if I'm in research mode or if I'm in hardcore writing mode. So in research mode, I kind of move slowly, and like so for this book, it's set in Egypt. So I went to Disney Plus. I opened up the National Geographic channel, and I looked to see who was the best person they interviewed. And I just wrote to her, said, I need to find out more about Egypt. Will you help me? And within 2 hours, she wrote back, and we did a whole Zoom, and I interviewed her. So that takes a big chunk of the day. When I try to write I try to, on a normal day, be writing by 9 and save all the non-writing stuff, of which there's a surprising amount, for afternoon. So right in the morning, the work of like everything from contracts to social media to whatever, try to do that in the afternoon. As it gets closer to deadline, it becomes more just writing. So for the last 3 weeks, it was pretty much writing every day by 6 a.m. and other than walks and eating, stopping at midnight. So it was, 18 hours minus all that other stuff. So it was probably 15 hours a day of writing. And I was really not fun to live with, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm sure my wife sometimes regrets that blind date. Yeah. Yeah. Your dad was born in Egypt? I wish I knew that 7 months ago. But hopefully I got the Egypt parts right. Normally I try to go to the places, but during COVID I couldn't. So I wrote 2 books having not traveled to the places in the book. But I do try to normally. All right? Yes. Raina Telgemeier, I got her a cookie once, and I was really nervous. And we talked for just a little bit, but I was standing, surprisingly, I was the closest one to the cookie table, and she asked for one, and I said, yeah, sure, I'll get that. And so, yeah, she's really nice, though. Yeah. I write all on computer and index cards, and I really recommend index cards. So when you're writing in your class, or when you have a writing assignment, even if it's nonfiction, even if it's a report, I'm a big fan of index cards. You can use Post-its. And you write the big ideas, or I write the chapter ideas on a card. And then I lay the cards out on the table, and I look at them so I can see kind of the whole story at once. I say, wow, I have a lot there, and I don't have much here. So what am I missing? And then when I feel like I have enough index cards, then I start to write. But it's all on the computer. And then when I'm done with the thing, I save it so that if I change things, I can always go back and find what I had if I change too much. Yeah. Percy Jackson books are pretty amazing, yeah. And the funny story about it, so the story that Rick Riordan told us when I was at that thing for Suzanne was that he wrote those books for his kid because his kid was dyslexic and couldn't read well. And his kid completely was uninterested in his books. And this is the joke that all of us have, which is most of our kids do not like our books, but they're really interested in each other. So like Wendy Mass's daughter and Karina Glazer's daughter are both like super into my books. And so I send them, when I'm writing, I just send them the Word file. And it makes no sense, but yeah. So I'm going to tell you one last thing before I go. A couple years ago, I got nominated for the Edgar Allan Poe Award. It was a really big deal for me. And I was kind of blown away. It was like my first hint that maybe I really could make a career out of doing this. It's given by the Mystery Writers of America, the best mystery books of the year. And I remembered that the first poem that Mr. Prothero had read to us was Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. Annabel Lee lived in the kingdom by the sea. And I thought, wow, it's come full circle to 5th grade. Started with Edgar Allan Poe. Now it's back to Edgar Allan Poe. And I've told that story about Mr. Prothero to kids all over the country. Tens of thousands of kids have heard that boring story. But he hadn't. And I made it my mission to find Mr. Prothero so I could tell him the story. And it took a while. He's in his 80s. But a couple months later, I was in his front room. And I gave him my books. And I told him how he changed my life. And he started to cry. So I started to cry. And I put on Facebook that I was going there, and kids kept sending me messages to give to him. Mr. Prothero, you were the debate coach, and I'm now a lawyer, and that's the first time I ever even thought of becoming one. Mr. Prothero, Tony Romero wrote this, I couldn't believe it. Mr. Prothero, you led the chorus, and I can still hear your voice, and now I sing on Broadway for a living. And finally, Mr. Prothero said, I need you to stop, James. It's too emotional for me to hear this all at once. I said, I'm sorry, I did not want to make you feel anything but good. But I have to make sure you know how much we love you, how important you were to us. Now, I will tell you something. It's super hard to find your teacher 30 years later. So don't wait. Make sure this year, sometime when you're alone with them, you thank them for a specific thing they've done. My wife's a teacher. I see what she does with kids all the time. And sometimes they come back and they find her. But they don't know. Thank your teachers, because I got to be honest, they've just gone through the worst few years in teaching history. And in some places, it's not getting much better. Teaching from home, doing this, doing that. Thank them. They're great. They love you. I love you. I hope you guys have a great rest of your school year. I hope you have a great, healthy, wonderful reading life. It's been great. Thank you so much.